I was so afraid I wasn't going to make this flight, so I sent David here to come and pick up my boarding pass. But now David has to go. Thank you. Bye.
In 1997, a science fiction movie arrived that looked like nothing audiences had ever seen before. The Fifth Element exploded with flying taxis, outrageous costumes, strange alien creatures, and a story that mixed comedy, action, and pure chaos. But behind all the color and madness lies a fascinating history. From secret casting stories to strange production decisions, these behind-the-scenes facts reveal a completely different side of the film. Number 1. The idea began when Luc Besson was still a teenager. One of the most surprising facts about The Fifth Element is how early the story began. Director Luc Besson didn't come up with the idea while working in Hollywood or developing a major studio project. Instead, he started imagining the world of the film when he was still a teenager in high school. At the time, Besson loved reading science fiction comics and futuristic adventure stories. Those influences started forming a strange and colorful universe in his mind. Flying cars, giant futuristic cities, and unusual alien characters slowly became part of the story he was creating. Back then, the project was far more ambitious than anything a young filmmaker could realistically produce. Besson imagined massive cities stretching into the sky and hundreds of strange creatures interacting with humans. It was the kind of large-scale science fiction that required enormous budgets and advanced visual effects, something nearly impossible for a new director. Because of that, the script sat unfinished for years. Besson focused instead on making smaller films to build his career. Movies like Subway, La Femme Nikita, and Léon, The Professional helped establish him as a respected director. But throughout those years, the idea for The Fifth Element never disappeared. He continued refining the story, slowly shaping it into the version audiences would eventually see. By the time the movie finally went into production in the mid-1990s, Besson had been thinking about the project for nearly 20 years. That long development period helped give the film its unique style and imagination. In many ways, The Fifth Element wasn't just another science fiction movie. It was the result of a world a young filmmaker had been dreaming about for most of his life. Number 2. The film took more than 20 years to finally get made. Even after Luc Besson became a successful director, bringing The Fifth Element to the screen was far from easy. The biggest problem was the scale of the story. The film required massive futuristic cities, hundreds of costumes, complicated visual effects, and elaborate action scenes. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, studios believed the movie would simply be too expensive to produce. At the time, Besson was still building his reputation. While films like La Femme Nikita and Léon, The Professional were successful, they were relatively modest productions compared to the massive science fiction world he wanted to create. Studios repeatedly told him the same thing. The idea was exciting, but the budget would be enormous. Instead of abandoning the project, Besson waited patiently. He knew that technology, budgets, and his own reputation would eventually reach a point where the movie could finally happen. By the mid-1990s, the situation had changed. Visual effects technology had improved, and Besson had become a respected international filmmaker. Investors in Europe were also willing to support ambitious projects. Finally, in 1995, production began. At the time, the film's budget was around $90 million, making it one of the most expensive movies ever produced outside of Hollywood. For Besson, it was the moment he had been waiting for since his teenage years. After more than 2 decades of imagining the world, The Fifth Element was finally becoming a reality. Number 3. The movie's wild costumes came from a legendary fashion designer. One of the most unforgettable parts of The Fifth Element is its bizarre and colorful fashion. From futuristic police uniforms to alien outfits and the unforgettable white bandage costume worn by Leeloo, the film's wardrobe looks unlike anything else in science fiction. That unique style came from legendary French fashion designer Jean-Paul Gaultier. Besson wanted the future in his film to feel strange, bold, and completely different from the typical gray metal worlds seen in many science fiction movies. Instead of designing the costumes through a traditional film wardrobe department, he decided to bring in one of the most creative designers in the fashion industry. Gaultier ended up designing more than 1,000 costumes for the film. Every character in the movie was given a distinctive look. The futuristic police uniforms, the flamboyant outfits worn by Ruby Rhod, and even the strange clothing worn by background characters were carefully designed to make the world feel alive and unpredictable. The process was enormous. Thousands of sketches were created and dozens of costume artists worked to bring Gaultier's ideas to life. Perhaps the most famous design is Leeloo's original outfit, the strange white bandage costume she wears after being recreated in the laboratory. The design instantly became one of the most recognizable looks in science fiction history. Today, the costumes remain one of the defining visual elements of The Fifth Element, proving that fashion can play just as big a role in world-building as special effects or set design. Number 4. Bruce Willis wasn't the first choice for Corbin Dallas. Today, it's almost impossible to imagine anyone else playing Corbin Dallas. Bruce Willis brought a relaxed, sarcastic style to the character that perfectly balanced the strange and chaotic world around him. But surprisingly, he wasn't the first actor considered for the role. When Luc Besson was first developing the project, several other action stars were discussed for the part. Studios wanted a major Hollywood name who could carry a large science fiction movie. At the time, the role of Corbin was written as a much more serious, traditional hero. But Besson had something different in mind. He didn't want the typical tough, fearless action star. Instead, he imagined a tired, slightly unlucky man who just wanted a quiet life, but kept getting dragged into chaos. Bruce Willis was perfect for that tone. After his success in movies like Die Hard and Pulp Fiction, he had already proven he could mix humor with action. When Willis read the script, he was immediately interested in the strange world and unusual characters. He also liked that Corbin Dallas wasn't a perfect hero. He's messy, frustrated, and often confused about what's happening around him. That personality helped ground the movie's bizarre universe. With aliens, giant cosmic threats, and eccentric characters everywhere, Willis's calm and slightly sarcastic performance gave the audience someone relatable to follow through the madness. His portrayal ultimately became one of the defining elements of the film. Number 5. The movie turned Milla Jovovich into a star. Before The Fifth Element, Milla Jovovich was not yet a major movie star. She had appeared in a few films and was already well known as a model, but she had never carried a huge science fiction blockbuster. Luc Besson was searching for someone unusual to play Lilu, the mysterious woman who becomes the key to saving the universe. The character needed to feel powerful, innocent, strange, and almost otherworldly at the same time. Finding the right actor for that role was extremely difficult. Besson auditioned many performers, but most of them felt too ordinary for the character. When Jovovich auditioned, however, he immediately noticed something different about her presence on screen. She had a unique combination of vulnerability and intensity that fit the character perfectly. Preparing for the role was not easy. Jovovich had to learn complex physical movements, perform demanding action scenes, and portray a character who barely speaks normal English for much of the film. She also worked closely with Besson to understand Lilu's emotional journey, from confusion and fear when she first appears, to gradually discovering the meaning of humanity. When the movie was released in 1997, Jovovich's performance quickly became one of the film's most memorable elements. Lilu's orange hair, unusual language, and powerful emotional moments turned the character into an instant icon of science fiction cinema. The role launched Jovovich into international fame and opened the door to many future action roles. Number 6. A completely new language was created for Lilu. One of the most unusual details in The Fifth Element is the strange language spoken by Lilu. When she first appears, she doesn't communicate in English. Instead, she speaks a mysterious alien language that sounds surprisingly real. That's because it actually was real. Luc Besson personally created an entirely new language for the character. He wanted Lilu to feel like someone who truly came from another world, not just a human character speaking broken English. Besson developed the language himself while writing the script. It included its own vocabulary and grammar rules, allowing conversations to sound natural rather than random. By the time filming began, the language already had around 400 words. Milla Jovovich didn't just memorize a few lines. She actually learned the language well enough to have simple conversations with Besson in it. During production, the two sometimes spoke to each other using the invented language to stay consistent with the character. This extra effort helped make Lilu feel believable. When she speaks in the film, her reactions and emotions match the meaning of the words rather than sounding like memorized nonsense. Interestingly, the language was never fully expanded after the movie finished, but fans of the film still study the dialogue today, trying to piece together the full structure of the language. It's one of the many small details that shows how much thought went into building the strange world of The Fifth Element. Number 7. Gary Oldman created one of sci-fi's most unusual villains. Every memorable science fiction story needs a great villain, and The Fifth Element delivered one of the strangest villains ever put on screen. Gary Oldman's character, Jean-Baptiste Emmanuel Zorg, is not a typical evil mastermind. Instead of shouting threats or commanding armies, Zorg is calm, oddly polite, and completely obsessed with profit. Oldman approached the character in a very unusual way. Rather than playing Zorg as a loud, intimidating villain, he decided to portray him as a powerful businessman who sees destruction simply as a business opportunity. This made the character far more interesting. Zorg doesn't see himself as evil. In his mind, he's simply making deals and expanding his influence. The destruction of the universe is just another transaction. Oldman also helped shape the character's bizarre appearance. The strange haircut, the stiff plastic collar, and the elegant suits all helped create a look that felt both futuristic and unsettling. Perhaps the most fascinating part is that Zorg never even meets the film's main hero, Corbin Dallas. Unlike many action movies where the hero and villain confront each other directly, The Fifth Element keeps them completely separate. Despite that, Oldman's performance became one of the most memorable parts of the film. His strange mixture of charm, greed, and quiet menace helped turn Zorg into one of science fiction's most unique villains. Number 8. Chris Tucker's Ruby Rhod almost went to someone else. Chris Tucker's performance as Ruby Rhod is one of the most unforgettable parts of The Fifth Element. Loud, flashy, dramatic, and completely unpredictable, the character adds a wild burst of energy every time he appears on screen. But Tucker was not the first person considered for the role. When the movie was being cast, Luc Besson initially offered the part to another major celebrity, Prince. The legendary musician was known for his flamboyant style and unique personality, which made him an interesting fit for the outrageous character. However, Prince eventually turned the role down. That decision opened the door for Chris Tucker, who at the time was already gaining popularity for his comedic performances. Tucker immediately understood how exaggerated the character was supposed to be. Instead of playing Ruby Rhod as a normal radio host, Tucker pushed the personality to the extreme. The high-pitched voice, dramatic reactions, and colorful costumes made the character feel larger than life. His scenes with Bruce Willis created some of the funniest moments in the movie. Ruby's over-the-top enthusiasm contrasted perfectly with Corbin Dallas's tired and sarcastic attitude. Today, Ruby Rhod is considered one of the most iconic supporting characters in science fiction films. It's hard to imagine anyone else bringing the same chaotic energy to the role. Number 9. The alien opera scene became one of the film's most famous moments. One of the most visually stunning scenes in The Fifth Element takes place inside a futuristic opera house aboard a luxury space cruise ship. In this moment, an alien performer known as the Diva Plavalaguna sings a beautiful and haunting opera while Corbin Dallas secretly attempts to retrieve the powerful elemental stones. The scene is remembered for two reasons: the incredible singing performance and the intense action sequence happening at the same time. The voice of the diva is a mix of real opera singing and advanced sound editing. Albanian opera singer Inva Mula recorded the main vocals. However, some of the extremely high notes and rapid vocal transitions were digitally enhanced because they were almost impossible for a human singer to perform naturally. Visually, the character was also unforgettable. The tall blue alien with elegant movements and a flowing costume looked completely different from typical science fiction creatures. Luc Besson carefully designed the entire sequence to contrast beauty and chaos. While the diva performs one of the most graceful musical pieces in the film, Leeloo fights off enemies in a fast-paced action scene behind the stage. The two moments were edited together so the rhythm of the fight matches the rhythm of the music. The result was one of the most unique scenes in the entire movie. Even decades later, the opera performance remains one of the most talked about moments in science fiction cinema. Number 10. The film was one of the biggest European productions ever. Although The Fifth Element feels like a massive Hollywood blockbuster, much of the movie was actually produced in Europe. Luc Besson wanted to create the film in a way that combined Hollywood scale with European creativity. A large portion of the filming took place in England at Pinewood Studios, one of the most famous film studios in the world. These studios were big enough to build enormous sets, including the futuristic city environments and the interior of the luxury space cruise ship. At the time, the production was incredibly ambitious. The film's budget reached around $90 million, making it one of the most expensive European films ever made. The crew itself was also very international. Designers, artists, engineers, and technicians came from many different countries. This mix of cultures helped give the movie its unusual visual style. Instead of following the typical look of American science fiction films, Besson encouraged artists to create something far more colorful and strange. The futuristic city scenes, filled with flying cars and towering buildings, were inspired by European comic books and futuristic illustrations. This creative freedom helped make the movie feel completely different from most science fiction films of the time. Rather than a cold, metallic future, The Fifth Element presented a bright, chaotic, and visually imaginative world. Because of that bold production approach, the movie still stands out nearly 3 decades later. Number 11. The flying taxi chase became one of the movie's most famous scenes. One of the most exciting moments in The Fifth Element happens early in the film when Corbin Dallas suddenly finds himself protecting Leeloo while being chased by the police through a massive futuristic city. The scene begins when Leeloo crashes through the roof of Corbin's flying taxi. Within seconds, the quiet ride turns into a high-speed chase through crowded sky traffic. Creating that sequence was extremely complicated. At the time, computer-generated effects were still developing, so the filmmakers relied heavily on detailed miniature models. Large-scale city models were built, complete with hundreds of tiny flying vehicles. These models were then filmed carefully to create the illusion of enormous futuristic skyscrapers and busy traffic lanes high above the ground. The production team also used a combination of digital effects and real camera techniques to blend the miniature shots with live-action footage of Bruce Willis inside the taxi. Luc Besson wanted the chase to feel fast, chaotic, and slightly comedic. Corbin Dallas isn't a confident action hero during the scene. Instead, he's confused and slightly irritated as he tries to figure out why he's suddenly being chased by the police. That combination of humor and action made the sequence unforgettable. The flying taxi chase quickly became one of the defining moments of the film and remains one of the most recognizable action scenes from science fiction movies of the 1990s. Number 12. The futuristic world was built using miniatures. When audiences watch The Fifth Element, the massive futuristic city looks incredibly detailed. Skyscrapers stretch into the clouds, thousands of flying vehicles move through narrow air lanes, and the entire world feels alive. But surprisingly, much of that city was not created using modern CGI. Instead, the filmmakers relied heavily on miniature models. At the time, digital effects were still limited. Creating a believable city entirely with computers would have been extremely expensive and not nearly as realistic as physical models. So the production team built enormous miniature versions of the city. Some of these models were several feet tall and filled with incredible detail. Tiny windows, roads, traffic lanes, and even miniature signs. Special cameras were then used to slowly move through these models, creating the illusion of flying through a gigantic futuristic environment. Once the miniature footage was filmed, digital effects were added to include the flying cars and moving traffic. This technique helped the movie achieve a level of realism that many early CGI films struggled with. The physical lighting and shadows from the models made the world feel far more believable. Even today, many viewers are surprised to learn how much of the film's futuristic city was built by hand. Number 13. The film nearly became one of the most expensive projects ever. From the beginning, The Fifth Element was an extremely ambitious production. Luc Besson wanted massive sets, complex action scenes, hundreds of costumes, and groundbreaking visual effects. All of that came with a very high price. By the time filming began, the budget had climbed to around $90 million, which was enormous for a science fiction movie produced outside Hollywood at the time. In fact, it became one of the most expensive European films ever made. Many investors were nervous. Science fiction movies were risky, and the strange style of The Fifth Element made it even harder to predict whether audiences would embrace it. During production, costs continued to rise. The huge sets, detailed costumes, and complex visual effects required an enormous crew and months of work. Despite the financial pressure, Besson refused to compromise his vision. He believed the movie needed to look bold and unique to stand out. When the film finally released in 1997, it performed strongly at the international box office and eventually earned over $260 million worldwide. That success proved that the risk had paid off. Number 14. Several small roles were played by unexpected celebrities. While The Fifth Element is known for its major stars like Bruce Willis, Milla Jovovich, and Gary Oldman, the film also includes several surprising appearances from real-life personalities. One of the most notable examples is Mathieu Kassovitz, a well-known French director who appears as the nervous thief attempting to steal the stones from Zorg's office. His awkward and slightly clumsy performance became a memorable comedic moment. Another surprising appearance comes from Mai Wen, who plays the futuristic diva's assistant on the cruise ship. She also happened to be closely connected to Luc Besson during the film's production. Even some background characters were played by musicians, performers, and designers connected to the creative world around Besson. This mixture of actors, artists, and real-life personalities helped give the movie a slightly unusual feel. Many of the characters who appear briefly on screen bring their own unique style to the roles. These small casting choices added to the strange and unpredictable atmosphere that makes The Fifth Element feel so different from traditional science fiction films. Number 15. The original ending was much darker. The ending of The Fifth Element that audiences saw in theaters is hopeful and emotional. After all the chaos and destruction, Corbin Dallas and Lilu ultimately save the universe by activating the ancient elemental weapon. The moment ends with love becoming the key force that defeats the great cosmic evil. But early versions of the script were quite different. In some early drafts, the ending was darker and more complex. The final confrontation with the giant cosmic entity was originally written with a much more intense tone, and Lilu's emotional journey was meant to feel far more tragic. Luc Besson initially imagined an ending where humanity's flaws played a larger role in the outcome. The story explored the idea that humans might not actually deserve to be saved. During development, however, Besson realized that the movie's colorful and adventurous tone worked better with a hopeful conclusion. The story already had plenty of chaos, danger, and strange characters, so ending the film with a positive emotional message made the story more satisfying. That change ultimately gave the movie one of its most memorable moments, the scene where Lilu discovers the power of love and uses it to activate the fifth element. Number 16. Many critics didn't know what to think when it first released. When The Fifth Element premiered in 1997, audiences were fascinated by its strange and colorful world. But many film critics were confused by it. At the time, most science fiction movies followed a much more serious tone. Films often focused on dark futures, serious themes, or complex scientific ideas. The Fifth Element, however, mixed action, comedy, romance, and wild visual design all in one story. Some critics thought the movie was too strange. They weren't sure how to categorize it. Was it an action movie, a comedy, a futuristic adventure? The movie didn't follow the usual rules, which made it difficult for some reviewers to understand what Besson was trying to do. However, audiences responded differently. Viewers loved the film's energy, humor, and imaginative world. The combination of outrageous costumes, strange characters, and exciting action scenes made the movie feel fresh compared to many other science fiction films. Over time, as new audiences discovered the film through television and home video, its reputation grew stronger. What once confused critics slowly turned into one of the reasons people loved the movie. Number 17. The movie slowly became a cult classic. While The Fifth Element performed well at the box office when it first released, its real popularity grew over the years that followed. Once the film reached home video and television, many viewers began discovering it for the first time. The strange characters, colorful visuals, and unforgettable scenes made it a movie people enjoyed watching again and again. Fans began quoting lines from the film, celebrating the outrageous costumes, and sharing their favorite moments. Characters like Lilu, Ruby Rhod, and Zorg quickly became fan favorites. Science fiction fans especially appreciated how different the movie felt compared to other films in the genre. Instead of focusing on dark futuristic worlds, The Fifth Element created a universe that was bright, strange, and full of personality. Over time, the film developed a strong cult following. Today, it is widely considered one of the most unique science fiction movies ever made. Nearly 3 decades later, fans still celebrate the film at conventions, cosplay events, and special screenings. What started as a strange and unusual blockbuster slowly transformed into a beloved classic. Number 18. The film influenced the look of many future sci-fi movies. When The Fifth Element first appeared in 1997, its visual style felt completely different from most science fiction films of the time. Instead of dark metallic spaceships and gloomy futuristic cities, the movie showed a world full of bright colors, crowded skylines, and strange fashion. At first, the style seemed unusual, but over time, many filmmakers began borrowing ideas from it. The movie's towering city design, with thousands of flying vehicles moving through stacked traffic lanes, became one of its most influential visual elements. Later science fiction films and video games began using similar ideas when designing futuristic cities. The film's fashion also had a huge impact. The bold, exaggerated clothing worn by characters like Ruby Rhod and Lilu helped inspire the idea that the future could look playful and stylish rather than purely functional. Even the mixture of humor and action started appearing in later science fiction movies. Instead of treating futuristic stories as completely serious, many filmmakers began blending comedy, strange characters, and fast-paced adventure in similar ways. Because of that influence, The Fifth Element quietly helped shape the visual language of science fiction in the years that followed. Number 19. The movie is filled with hidden details. Like many cult classics, The Fifth Element contains dozens of small details that viewers often miss the first time they watch it. Luc Besson and his design team filled the futuristic world with tiny background jokes, unusual signs, and clever visual references. In the giant city scenes, for example, advertisements and building signs hint at the strange everyday life of the future. Some of the props and technology also contain hidden humor. Vending machines, police equipment, and even household appliances in the film were designed with exaggerated futuristic features that reward careful viewers. Another interesting detail is the way the movie subtly connects its opening scene in ancient Egypt to the futuristic story. The symbols and designs seen in the early temple scene appear again later in the film when the elemental stones are revealed. These small visual clues help tie the story together across thousands of years. Because of these hidden details, many fans enjoy rewatching the film repeatedly. Each viewing reveals new background elements that were easy to miss before. Number 20. A sequel was discussed but never happened. After the success of The Fifth Element, many fans expected a sequel to follow. The film's imaginative universe seemed perfect for more adventures. At one point, Luc Besson even mentioned that he had ideas for additional stories set in the same world. However, several factors prevented a sequel from ever moving forward. One reason was the enormous cost of the original movie. Creating the futuristic world required huge sets, complex visual effects, and thousands of costumes. Producing another film on that scale would have required another massive budget. Another factor was Besson's creative philosophy. He often prefers telling a complete story in a single film rather than extending it into a long series. Over the years, rumors about a sequel occasionally resurfaced, but nothing ever officially entered production. In a way, that decision may have helped preserve the film's legacy. Without multiple sequels, The Fifth Element remains a unique standalone story. Number 21. The Fifth Element still feels completely unique today. Nearly 3 decades after its release, The Fifth Element still feels unlike almost any other science fiction movie. Part of that uniqueness comes from its bold visual style. The colorful costumes, imaginative city design, and strange alien characters created a world that feels alive and unpredictable. But the film's personality also plays a huge role. Instead of focusing only on serious science fiction ideas, the movie mixes humor, romance, action, and adventure. One moment, audiences are watching a massive space opera performance, and the next moment, they're seeing a chaotic shootout or a bizarre comedy scene. Very few movies manage to combine so many different tones while still feeling cohesive. That creative risk is exactly what helped the film stand out. Today, The Fifth Element is remembered not just as a science fiction movie, but as a truly original cinematic experience. Even after many years and countless new sci-fi films, it remains one of the most imaginative and memorable movies of its era. Nearly 3 decades after its release, The Fifth Element still stands as one of the most imaginative science fiction movies ever made. From its wild costumes and unforgettable characters to the fascinating stories behind its creation, the film proves that sometimes the strangest ideas become the most memorable. And if you thought you knew everything about this movie, these facts show there's always another hidden detail waiting to be discovered.